All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2021 semester at Durham College and client-side scripting, and it's week 10, part one of our broadcast. We're going to talk about the Express generator today and Ejs. And welcome to those who are live with me on Zoom and for those people who are watching on YouTube. Let's go to last week. Last week we talked about the mean stack, which is Mongo, Express, Angular, Node, the MVC three-tier web application design pattern, Npm we kind of talked about before, Node.js. We kind of created a small Node.js server and then eventually modified it to run with Express. Kind of a first look at Express, and we talked about Node.js event-driven development, common JS modules and how they link in Node.js. We use Typescript as well for part of what we did last week. And what are we doing this week? This week we're continuing with that. We're going to do more of an intro into Express, more details. We're going to use the Express generator. We're going to talk a little bit about routing this week. And the Ejs view engine, what that is. ICE 9 will be due Saturday. Lab 4 again is due week 13. I have slowed this down. I was going to completely release this last week, but there were a few tweaks I'm putting into place, and you should have it this week. Again, I've already previewed what it's like, so we can start working on it. But it's going to be due again the last week of class. Okay, so that's when that's due. Again, where are we? We're sitting at week 10. My week 10, your week 11, as an example. So we're kind of at the bottom of the semester. We're doing, again, we're on track in terms of where we are. And again, keep in mind, we only have a few short weeks left before we're done. And the last week will be kind of authentication and everything else and help you build Lab 4. So that is where we are. Today we're starting with a starter. And I'm going to talk about that starter in a sec. But for now, let's start talking about Express. So TJ was a developer. He produced, well, he was involved in Node.js. I'm not going to produce his or try and pronounce his last name, but one of his greatest projects was the Express framework. And what he did was he wrapped it around this other middleware project called Connect. And he extended Connect to include additional functionality. So remember, Node.js, what we learned about last week about Node.js was it's bare bones, right? It doesn't come with anything in terms of, kind of fancy. You can set up a server, but it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of little tweaks and stuff like that. But there's a lot of people running servers these days. So it makes sense to run a framework like Express, which is something that can help us quickly deploy a Node.js backend to the web. And we kind of last week we actually looked at a web service or a cloud service called Heroku, which we're going to continue on with this week. So then, it made sense for us to create a framework, and really what we're doing is so far, we used kind of a single server last week. It was like a server.js or an index.js file to make our application. However, one of the things that we're going to be doing with Express is using something called Ejs Template, the Ejs templating engine, or the view engine. And Ejs, we talked about that briefly last week. And again, Nicholas made some comments about, hey, we've seen something like this before, right? So if we look at Ejs, right, it looks like this. And Nick, what did you say about this last week? You said this looks like something you've seen, as an example. JSP, that's right. It looks like JSP. It could look even like old school ASP.NET and a bunch of other stuff, right? So, at the end of the day, right, when you look at this, it's kind of a simple way of injecting objects into our HTML, right? So this is kind of what we're going to be doing. It's familiar and it's simple. It's not the only view engine. There's a lot of view engines that Express supports, but this is kind of one of the most popular ones because of its simplicity. So that's what we'll be using. We'll talk about a view engine, how to use that, and we're going to be converting our one of the purposes of Ejs 9 is to convert what we have into using the Express generator. All right, so that's what we're going to be doing. So again, we install Express. We did that last week, and but like it says, directly installing modules doesn't make sense, not scalable. So one of the things we want to try and do is we want to use a scaffolding engine. And the way to do that is using something called the Express generator. So again, I invite you to, as we start, I'm just going to pull up a command prompt here, and I'm just going to go into administrative mode. So if you want to do this with me, run as administrator. And what I want to do here, just when we start, is do an npm install, and there's something called the Express generator, and then we want to install it on the in the global. Globally, we want to install it globally so we can use it anywhere. Express generator -g. And this is where we're going to start today. So the Express generator is a scaffolding framework for Express. Okay, so let's do that. So when I install this, you're going to see that it's going to install, the Express generator, and we're going to start from there today. So the first thing is install this Express generator thing, and then let's just do that again with another command prompt. I'm just going to bring up a non-administrative command prompt now. I'm going to swim to mine's on OneDrive, and let's go to WEBD6201. So you can see that there's a lot of stuff here, and I've already got the Ejs 8b starter as a place where I can kind of grab files for myself and put them in. But we're going to make something called week 10b, right? And we're going to do that with the Express generator. And the way to do that, and again, you can start, we'll refer to the starter in a second, but the way you would do that is you would type in the following commands: Express, right? So that's you're using the Express generator just by just calling Express on the command line, right? And then you're going to say -e for Ejs, right? And then after that, the name of the of your folder, and it's ours is going to be, for me, it's going to be week 10b, because that's you guys, right? And if I press enter, it scaffolds out a framework for me, right, very quickly. It includes roots and a structure that we're going to modify, all right? But the main things that this gives us is a package.json file, app.js, and a server.js file that we're going to see in a second. It tells us that in order for us to use this, we want to change directory to week 10b and then do an npm install. So I can do that. So I can say cd week 10b, and here we have our structure. Okay, we're going to come back to this, but I want to show you this so you can see what it looks like and on the edge. So really what we're doing is, again, let's go back and review. Express, we've kind of installed the Express generator. So npm install express-generator, right, -g. So we did that earlier. And then we did Express -e week 10b, or whatever you want to call your in-class exercise 9, right? And it just did all this. It basically created all these folders and structures and everything else. We're going to use this to build upon over the next several weeks. Okay, couple weeks. All right, so that's where we are right now. I'm going to close this down, and we're going to come back to that. But so npm install Express, this is just really just the Express module. And like it said, it doesn't make any sense, right? We're not going to just do it like this, because sure, it does Express, but we want to add additional dependencies, which we've talked about before in our package. Last week, we built a small server that kind of looked like this, which was kind of either you can call the server.js or index.js. People do different things. And where we basically created we imported Express as an example, as a module. We created an app instance, so an object of Express. And we also learned last week that whenever we run a server, one of the things we made use of was something called nodemon, right? So if we learned that as well last week. I'm just going to run nodemon one more time as administrator for you guys to talk about this. So again, when you install nodemon, we did this last week, but I'll do it again. I'll do an npm install nodemon, and again in the global kind of reach, right? -G. When you install nodemon, what it does is it creates a way of us monitoring our node server and restarting it, and that's kind of important. One thing that nodemon doesn't do is it doesn't do browser sync. In order for you to do browser sync with nodemon, you need to use some kind of package, a packager, and one of them that does a really great job is something called Webpack, but we'll come back to that in a second. All right, so we installed nodemon. We noticed that whenever we set up a server, as an example, and we restart the server, if we don't restart the server, then whatever server object has been created, we noticed that last week, is the one that is running, and that instance is something that's immutable until we restart the server. Once we restart the server, then we can run it again and everything is good. Okay, so that's something we noticed. But Express made running a server much easier, and it took care of things like MIME types and a bunch of other stuff that we had to do manually with Node. And again, that's why Express was built. Express was built to make it easier for us to create a Node.js backend. So one of the things we're going to be using is we're going to use app-use to configure our server, and app-listen to listen for server events. That's what we're going to do, request and response events. And res send, we used that last week again to basically populate a page with simple data, and we can also specify other information. And we can also do node server or nodemon, and then we're good. That's how simple it is to run an Express application, and we talked about that last week. A few of the objects that we learned about last week were the request and response objects, and there's also a next object that we're going to learn about. So application really is this immutable instance of the server. The request object is something that we're going to get back from, again, where the user generates a request object when they go to the website. And request, from an Express perspective, is a wrapper around Node.js's HTTP request object. For Express, response is the response that comes back from the server, right? And the response object has stuff that the server loads into it. So it's almost like a payload that comes back from the server that includes many things. Okay, so that's what happens with the response object. And let's talk about the application object really quickly. We can do configuration. We can set up the name as an example of environment variables. We can kind of set up environment variables with the application object. We can use an app.get as an example to get environment variables. We can set up the app engine, which is the view engine. In this case, we're going to be using probably Ejs as an example, and other things we can do with the app object. Okay. So we have app, the verb, and then some kind of callback or thing we do. We also can do routing, and we also can look at the parameters that come from if we want to include additional functionality. The request object, the big ones we look at, again, are params, and we use the body parser middleware package that's included with Express when you download it. So params, what it does is it looks like the routing parameters, right, as well as the body object. If I use I submit a form and I have different fields in the form, then it's the fields and the variables are stored in the body object of the request. So user makes a request, we do a post request, different kinds of requests, a post request or a get request are most common. And then in the body object, we have a bunch of the fields that we're going to use from the users, and that's where they come from. And we use body parser to parse the kind of the data that's embedded in the body of the request. All right, and then we also have access to the path, the host, and the IP. There's lots of stuff that comes with the request payload from the user to the server. Okay, so that's something we can interpret, we can intercept, and we can do something with. The response object on the way back out from the server also has a lot of stuff. We can we can set a status code as a response. We can redirect. Redirects almost like an HTTP href. kind of thing that we did before. We can also use the response object to send information to the page, or JSON. A lot of times we use response.json, and the reason why we want to use this is if we wanted to create an API, so Express is an API as opposed to Express just to serve up pages, it would just serve up JSON. As an API and serving up JSON data, what we can do is we can consume that data with a front-end framework like Angular or React or Vue or something. So we can use Express not just for web pages, but also as for routing and as a back end, which is really cool. And so it's a separate service that runs maybe even on a separate server than the front end framework, right? So we've done that before with Angular. I think Angular now is at Angular 12. It's really spinning fast, and React and so on. Res render is what we're going to be using starting this week, and res render is really going to render the view. So we specify the view we want to render, and then what the callback function is going to do once we render the view. The callback function basically triggers when the view is being rendered. So it's kind of interesting. And when we say render, I want you to think about what's really happening when we use a templating engine like Ejs. What's happening is there is no view, there is no HTML, right? HTML is literally being created by JavaScript. It's going to be injected into the page completely. So we don't have, let's say, HTML like traditionally as we do normally, right? Normally we have an index.html page and as an example, and then we inject JavaScript into it. Here, the index.html page is being created for us by the view engine. All right, so that's something that's happening. So whenever you see anything in the templating engine, it's not HTML and it's not JavaScript. It's kind of something in between. And then what we're doing is we're smashing our code plus HTML markup, and we're creating or rendering a view. That's what we're doing. Okay, so that's something to note. We also use an additional external middleware, for example, Morgan for logging HTTP requests, the body parser that we talked about earlier. There's lots of other stuff that we use in terms of Express static. We talked about last week how to serve up static pages, cookie parser to look at cookies, for example, on our and also session. This session middleware, Express session, that basically takes care of persistent session for when it comes to logging in, logging out, those kind of things. We use Express session for that. Okay, so lots of little things that we use on top of or with Express to make kind of the whole framework even more usable, all right, and more extensible. So again, what we want to try and do is we want to make this, even though the Express is pattern agnostic, it means like it doesn't really care. You can make it so that it uses the model view controller kind of pattern or not, right? It's really up to you. And that's great. We're also going to be later on, we're going to be using other extensions as an example. For example, Mongoose, which connects to MongoDB and so on. Okay, so that's something we're going to be doing starting as early as next week. When we configure the Express application, what we want to do is start thinking about this global environment variable we talked about last week, which is process.env. Remember that when we tried to put up our port 3000 on Heroku, it didn't work because we can't reserve port 3000 just for our little website. It's being used by everybody else. So we have to accept whatever port that Heroku or Microsoft Azure, or this is an external port, or whatever cloud service you're using is going to give us, as opposed to us specifying a port like 3000. Okay, we can't do that. And so we can use the process.environment variable, global variable that contains other stuff inside of it, a payload again, other properties that we can tap into on the server. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit this semester. And then we'll have some kind of package.json that is going to be served up to us by the Express generator that looks like this. All right. We're going obviously to add to it, right? Because we're going to add Bootstrap and Font Awesome and a bunch of other front end stuff that also works with because we're using Node.js not just for the back end, but also for the front end in our examples. Do we need to? No, I can use the content delivery network, right? So CDNs for the front end. But really, if we're using Node and Yarn, let's say for the back end, might as well use it for the front end as well. All right. So in our examples. All right. So that's something that we've been doing. Again, a bit of a review. When we download and install the Express generator, it's going to start looking more like this, right? Where we can actually use we can actually change the mode that we're in. So if I say something like if I use process.env.nodem, the node environment, I can set it to either development or production mode. And a lot of times what we want to do is when we shift into production mode, we can change some configuration as part of our website. For example, maybe in development mode, we have a local database that we tap into. But in production mode, we tap into the one that's on the cloud, right? So we can make these changes and we can detect which mode we're in by using the global variable process.env.nodem, right? That's what we can do with that. So there's ways of developing locally and producing remotely. All right, and this is how we would be able to kind of switch between the two things when it comes to using a different kind of port. Okay. I'm just going to continue here. When it comes to rendering views, again, think about the word render, which means to draw or to create, right, if you will. We create the view, right? Nicholas says, I missed the second part of Express after install. Is that going to cause problems moving forward? No, we're going to get back to that, Nicholas. Don't worry, I'm going to go over it again. So again, when it comes to what a templating engine is, the basic idea is we have a template, and then what we're going to do is we're going to inject both our HTML and our JavaScript inside of it. All right. But the template almost is like a container, and the template has some basic code to get us started. And like we saw, we kind of made a template on our own when we used Ejs, right? Again, the way it works is like this. We have our view, the user requests the view, right? The view accesses the controller, which connects to the model, usually some kind of data store. And then through the controller, it returns a data back into the template, which populates our view, right? So really what we have is a single page application again that is being rendered. We don't have multiple pages. We have one page with multiple content partials. That's what we're going to do. So the reason why I had an underlying motive for getting you guys to use all those content partials in the first place, because once we got there, once we created content partials, then it's easy for us to basically transition to an Express backend, right? If I had waited till now to do all that idea about partials and components and all that kind of stuff, then transitioning to a backend would be a big shock, right? Because we'd be using everything front end. Our structure would be the old way, and then you'd have trouble. So that's why we did it this way. So really, we have two methods when it comes to rendering views. We have an app render, which is used to render the view, and then pass HTML to a callback function. But the more common request is res render, which renders the view locally and sends HTML as a response. So basically, when we say sends HTML, it actually creates or all the HTML code combined with JavaScript, to create a response that we render or we draw to the page. That's what happens. Okay. So again, so we're just looking at packages, and this is more of what it looks like. Here's what when we configure the view engine, we say app.set views, and then we use whatever the views is. We combine this with the path a lot of times, and then we say, okay, we're going to set the view engine as whatever type we want. EJS, handlebars. There's a bunch of other ones that are out there. Pug was the old one, and so on. All right, so that is how we do it. We have to make sure that all of our views and even our partials have the EJS extension because we're using the Ejs templating engine. So that's something we have to change today. We have to start converting all of our files from HTML to Ejs, right? Because there is no more HTML. Remember, there's no more HTML at all. We are going to create the HTML inside of a page, okay? And typically what happens is the template will look something like this, right? Where we have a doc type as an example, and then there's Ejs, right? We're going to inject Ejs into the title. We're going to inject Ejs into the h1 tag. And notice that Ejs is interesting in that it has these little options. So less than, percent equals. What does that mean? Well, if you go back to Ejs for a second, and if you scroll down to getting started, then what it does is it talks about a lot of options that you can kind of create, and also tags. And these are very interesting. I'm going to make this really big here. So it looks like if I do a less than percent, that's a scriptlet tag for control flow, like it says, right? So that's what it does. And so you can use things like if statements, for statements, those kind of things can be used like this, just by these things. If I do percent, less than percent equals, we kind of inject some kind of value into the HTML. That's what we do. And there's some other options here as well. For example, if I do a less than percent underscore, that means that we remove white space. If we, we can also, we basically strip down, or we strip the white space away, a little bit of trimming on kind of at the beginning. And we can also trim mode, which basically takes away at the end. So we can do trimming at the end, where it takes away things like new lines, and we can also trim it at the end when it comes to white spaces. And we use these because sometimes there's cases where the stuff that we inject into HTML, we want to remove or trim it because it's usually in the form of strings. And we're going to talk about includes. We're going to include different kinds of partials, and the way we're going to do the includes is something that looks like this. Okay, so we're going to include something as an example, and we're going to inject it into the page. Okay, so we're going to get back there, but basically what we're going to have is these kind of little syntax, here that allows us to inject stuff into the page. Okay, again, we're using this less than percent and percent greater than as kind of like bookends when it comes to injecting content. So we're going to use something called remember we have our different parts of our structures. We have the model, view, and controller. The controller is what we use for actually rendering the page. That's something that's going to happen. We're also going to have a separate routers folder. So we have routers, we have controllers, we have views, we have models, we have all these different folders that we're going to set up in a second, right? And the controller is actually going to be able to output a function. Remember exports.render, what's actually happening is render is the rendering function, module.exports.render. So render is a function that basically does, in this case, the rendering of the HTML code. We can also call this a specific function for different pages. For example, module.exports. And then we can make a name like display home. And display home will actually, render the home page as an example, which we're going to see later on. We talked about serving static files before, and we're going to do more of that because there's going to be some of the things that we need to serve statically. For example, if I want to serve up my public or client, pages, I don't want to sit there and serve up each individual or route each individual JavaScript file or CSS file. Those aren't as important as the actual pages that I'm going to land on and that I'm going to render content on, right? So I want to use some static rendering as well as, or some static access, if you will, as well as additional routing. So express static is something we're going to use. Again, when it comes to injecting things like, content, we can say, as an example, I can serve up a static file, and notice that because my logo is inside, let's say, an images folder, but the images folder is in some kind of public, we don't have to reference the keyword public or the path public. We just basically say image. So public is inferred. It's part of the path. So we don't use that. And we saw that last week when we removed component remove views from the path of our JavaScript last week. And we're going to continue to do some more stuff like that this week. So that is something that we're going to do. The last part is about configuring sessions, and I'll leave that for you to read. And that's going to be something where we're going to use that for authentication later on. So that is kind of a really kind of a high-level overview of Express and a bit of what we're going to be doing this week in terms of converting our structure. Let's start with our in-class exercise 9. It's is it really difficult? I'm not sure. Is it different? Is it really different from JSP? I think it's very similar, but there's some obviously differences because JavaScript is using JavaScript is being used with EJS, and JSP uses slightly different syntax. All right, so let's get into that. So what we want to do now is we want to go and download, like I said before, this the last week's starter, which is or last week's in-class exercise, which is in-class exercise 8B for you guys, which I've already gone and done. And let me just bring that up off screen for a second. So this is what our module looks like right now. We've kind of downloaded this, and this is our old stuff from last week. Okay, notice I'm not changing the name. I'm keeping the name the same because I'm not going to really do anything with it. I'm using it as just for dragging and dropping, which we're going to see in a second. What I've done instead is I've created this week 10B, and I've done that by using the Express generator. Let me do that one more time for you guys so you can see it. So I'm going to delete week 10B, and let's do it one more time just for Nick. So I'm going to say something like commands, right? And I'm going to bring up my command, and I want to swim to my desktop, right? So let's do this one more time. And I want to go to Durham, where I have my stuff. And inside of my folder where I have all of your files, I'm going to create or scaffold out a structure for a web application using the Express generator. So this is how you do it. Again, I'm going to use Express because I've downloaded and installed Express. The way I did that for those people who came in late is Npm Install Express-generator -G. I did that as an administrator, okay? Or you can do that if you don't need to do it as an administrator. You can just do it just like this. And then after I installed that, I'm going to do an Express -E for the templating engine. You can specify other options, right? If I just put Express in there, it's going to say we need to. You can actually. It says, do you want a destination input? Do you want to continue? No, I don't. If I want to do help, if I do Express -help. It'll give you a couple of things, right? You can say -E for EJS, --pug for the pug engine, HBS for handlebar support, Hogan, and they have other ones too. But those are the most popular ones that are being used today. You can see that the view engine you can specify. There's a lot of other ones, Dust, Jade, that's really old, Twig and Vash. We don't use those as much anymore. But the ones that are most popular are these ones, EJS, Pug, and HBS handlebars, right? Or Hogan. All right, so these are the ways you can do it. So we do -E, -V specifies the view engine if I want to. --, no view. I can use static HTML instead of a view engine. I can do that instead. There's advantages, disadvantages to this, right? We take away control when we do this kind of stuff. -C specifies the style sheet engine I want to use. For example, if I want to use less or Compass or Sass, and you guys may or may not remember what those things are or even know what they are. If I go to Sass and if I look at that, then it is kind of like CSS with superpowers. It's more like a compiled version of CSS that extends the CSS functionality. And for those people who like to work with CSS and are more, in my opinion, if you're a developer, you want to add things to CSS like variables and so on, Sass allows you to do a lot of that stuff. And there's some really great things. But again, it's a little bit outside the scope of this course to do CSS with superpowers and Sass. But you can specify that if you really want to, right? You can say that I want to use Sass or with Compass or less. There's a bunch of different ones that allow you to do that. Otherwise, it defaults to plain CSS. I can also add a Git Ignore file, --git. That's what that does. -force, force on a non-empty directory. So I can actually install it in a directory that already exists, right? Which I'm not going to do. I could do it for ours, but I'm not going to do it. And of course, -h for help. All right, so that's what we just did here. And the way the usage is Express options in the directory you want to go into. All right, so if that's the way it's going to be, then I want to say Express, my options are -e, right? if I can put -E, in the directory we want, which is week 10b. Okay, and that's what scaffolds out like we did last time. So this is our start of our in-class exercise right here. This is where we're going to start. All right, so now that I have that, I'm going to close this little thing down, and I have week 10b that's been generated, and I'm going to go and open up our lovely Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to drag and drop week 10b in there. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm going to do. And notice our structure now that we have. We have a bin, we have an app.js, which is this, and we have other things in here as well. What we need to do when we first start off is there's some good things that it's given us, but we also have some bad things, and we're going to fix these things, okay? So first bad thing is we have inside of our bin folder, we have a www file that has no extension, all right? And this is fine, but I'm not going to use it this way. I want you to take the www file and drag it out into the root folder. And then we're going to rename the www file as to make sense of it for you, I'm going to rename this thing to server.js, okay, server.js. And I'm going to press save. When I do this, it actually just revamped its reference to the app.js object, which is this right here. All right, so that's what server.js did. I don't need the bin folder anymore. I can delete it. So let's delete the bin folder. All right, so that is server.js and so on. I also have a package.json file that is created for me. I haven't installed any of the packages yet, but what I want to do is I want to start thinking about incorporating our own files from last time, right? So in our files, we had our own package.js file, and we want to include some of those things in here too. And also I love the Express generator because it starts us off nice. And mostly with our server.js, believe me, and the app.js files, those two are good to start off with, especially if you're a beginner. Again, you can do a lot of this yourself if you really wanted to. But one thing I don't like is the versions of the code that comes with everything. We want to upgrade these. Let's do that now. So first thing is I want to move away from using NPM. I want to use Yarn for a second. Yarn is a little quicker. Remember we talked about this? So I wanted to use a Yarn. And if I do upgrade, if I do Yarn upgrade, and if I do that, it says Yarn upgrade, no lock file in this account. Do a Yarn install to generate one. So Yarn install. And what this does is it downloads and installs all the Node.js packages. There it is, okay? So then I want to do a Yarn upgrade. And if I do a Yarn upgrade, it goes through the packages and it looks through any of the packages that are kind of installed inside of, that are kind of dependencies of these packages, and we're good to go. But what I want to do is I want to move away from using these versions. So I want to say Yarn add on top of what it is, cookie parser. So just updating. I want to also Yarn add debug. I want to Yarn add EJS, Yarn add express. I'm doing this all at the same time on one line. HTTP errors, as well as Morgan. I want to do all that in one. And remember, you can kind of chain as many of these commands as you want. And if I press enter, what it's going to do is we're going to grab all those files and upgrade these files to the latest versions, which is what we want. Okay, so good support, all right, for these files. Notice that they all changed to different versions now, with better functionality actually, and some bug fixes and security issues, some security fixes as well. All right, so that's one thing I want to do. Even though I downloaded Express just now, the Express generator, it's always good to upgrade these things, in my opinion. The start script also has to be changed. There is no longer a bin www file. It's going to be a server.js. Let's change this to server.js. So this is configuration. We're going to do more of this in a second, but this is the first part. All right, and we're going to see what we're going to have in a second before we go further, but one thing at a time, right? So first we upgrade. Next, what I want to do is I want to look at the server.js file and see what we get. We get a bunch of these things here. We get, we're going to require app. App actually is split off from our app.js. App.js and server.js could be one big file, but what they've done is they separated the server part from the application instance to make it easier for us to look at these things as opposed to one massive file. So server is just the server configuration and app is configuring our web application. Okay, so which is kind of similar, but has different reasons for being. server.js. Let's take a look at this. So now what we do is we set up some debug. So this is our week 10b server. This is in a debug view. We're using debug to get output. HTTP, we know what that is. It's an HTTP module. So this is standard Node.js stuff. That's on the back end. And we have something called normalized port. And we do a bunch of stuff here. Notice we're using vars. Let's get rid of these vars and change them, especially when it comes to requiring stuff like this. Let's change this to const. And we want to change these vars up here to lets in the server. So let, because we're going to require, for now anyway, we're going to require an app. And this is require debug. This will be a const. We can do that. This one will be a let because we're getting a normalized port. And this one will be a let because we're going to say we're going to create a server. Actually, the server could be a const in here as well because we're not going to modify the server, right? Once it's been created, we're just going to use it and configure it, but we're not going to modify it or change it, right? And there's some other stuff that we have. Any place you see vars, we can go through. We can also do a Control F, but I'm doing it by hand so we can go through and see the areas where we want to modify stuff. For example, here and here. Okay, we also want to, I'm going to change my coding style so that it conforms to what I like. You can change it or leave it the same for you, depending on what you like. I like it this way. Some people hate it this way. It's really up to you. But to me, what it does is it lines up our curly braces on top of each other so I can make sure that I don't go into curly brace hell, which is like, I don't know when the curly brace begins and ends. So that's kind of why I do it. So that's server. I've kind of just fixed up the server a little bit. We're going to do more. I'm going to go back into my app.js now. All I'm doing, guys, I'm changing vars to lets and consts. In this case, let's change everything first to lets, and then we'll go into these ones. So create error actually is a const, but let's change everything else to lets. So I'm going to say Control F. I'm going to look for vars, and let's modify everything to lets for now. So all those changes. And I want to change these ones specifically to const because create error, express, the path, cookie parser, logger. These are third-party modules that I'm going to download. And this is some routing configuration, routing, that I'm going to talk about later. And this is my app. So app instance, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm making my web application instance is what I'm doing here with my Express. So first I do some third-party modules. I configure my routing. I set up my app, right? And then what I do is I configure my app by adding the view engine and so on. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. All right, so very simple. Again, I want to change the curly braces from kind of side by each to up and kind of on top of each other. That's just my way of doing things. You may love it, you may hate it. All right, so that's the first part. So that's kind of our app.js. There's also more code like this inside routes. So I have two routes. I have a users route and I have an index.js route. Let's get rid of the users route because I'm not going to have authentication right now. So user, I'm just going to delete it. So no more user, which means that I got to change my app.js and get rid of users, the user router. So let's get rid of this part, this line. Okay, and this line. So now your app should look something like this. This is just the first part. I'm going to put this up on GitHub now. I think this is a good place to put this up on GitHub as a starter. So I'm going to say git add init, git add dot, git commit -m, and then I'll call this initial commit. Awesome. One thing we can also do is remember that I can always do a yarn init again. And what yarn init again will do is allow me to step through and add different things that I want, right? For a description, demo project for WEBD6201, and then in-class exercise 9, right? And then our starting point is server.js. Right, my repository URL, I'm going to leave that blank. This is this. Here's my license, right? I'm going to leave it as MIT private. I'll leave that as true and saved. And if you notice, what it did was it updated my package.json file with any additional changes like description, main, author, and license, right? So this is kind of cool. It did all those things. And we can move these around. We don't have to put them here, but it put them in here because we already had dependencies and the other stuff. It didn't disrupt what we had. It just added to it. So I can kind of cut these, and instead of me doing it version and all that stuff private, I can put it up here. So kind of that is what I want to do, right? So I can start setting up my stuff the way where it's obviously version is 1. My name is not week 10B, but rather WEBD6201 in the winter 2021 semester, and it's Ejs 9B. That's what we're at, right? Or Ejs 9. Let's put Ejs. Let's make it Ejs 9. No, Ejs 9B is good. All right. So that is this modified package. We'll say, well, we'll modify it a little bit more going forward, but that is kind of our start. And we can do a yarn init as many times as we want. Let's get a package or a repo from online. So we go up online. I'm going to make a new repository here for us. So Ejs 9B, let's make that. So we're going to do, this is all the same stuff we've done many times, guys. That's why I'm running a little bit faster today, because I have a lot to cover. WEBD6201 in the winter 2021 semester, and it's Ejs 9B. I'm going to get steering instructions about how to connect my project. I'm just going to grab these last 3 lines of code here, copy them, go back to my command prompt and paste them, and then press enter. And voila, you're going to have a connection to your repository. I can also run yarn again. So if I do a yarn init again, I can make it as many times as I want. And what it'll do is I can modify what I have, or look at this, it picked up my repository URL now, so I don't have to do this manually myself, which is why I wanted to do this, right? So it kind of picks it up, and then what it does is it takes my repository URL and places it right here. What I can do is I can copy it out of there and put it right underneath my server. So I can do something like this, and this is good. So that kind of gives me some information about my package. So again, I'm kind of improving my package.json file. We have another package.json file also from before. We have this one, right? And we also have a tsconfig.json from last week. So this is from our starter. Remember we talked about the starter? So I want to grab my tsconfig.json and pull it into my project like this, because we're going to use Typescript too, right? We're going to do that. So this is still valid. And we also have a README file. We don't have a README file here. Let's pull that in. So README file, let's pull that in, right? So my README file is for Ejs 9B, right? For Ejs 9, right? So there's my README file. And let's take a look at my package.json for a second. And my package.json from before had almost the exact same stuff, but we also had these engine stuff. So we had this engine. So I'm going to bring this engine in because I know that I'm going to put this up on Heroku today. So I'm going to grab this engine stuff, so I don't have to type it in again, and include it in my own package.json. And a good way to do this is just to do a side-by-side and have my old one here and my new one here. So I'm going to do my package.json here. Wherever you click, by the way, is where it loads. And then I want to do side-by-side in comparison of what I have here compared to what I have there. And I want to grab this part, and I want to put this underneath my license. But let's make this 15 instead of 14. See what happens with if my Heroku picks up 15 or not, or does it even have 15? Private is true is something new. That makes it so that this npm package isn't going to be shared, but we really don't care about this. We can erase this. I don't care about making it private or public. These are good. And then I have these dependencies here as a front end. Now, normally what I can do is I can take these dependencies and put them on there. But what I want to tell you is that we want to make it in alphabetical order. So I'm just going to reinstall some of this by hand. So again, control backtick as I install some of these dependencies. And let's just do the same thing we did last time. So clear yarn add, again, at Fort Awesome / font awesome free, right? At popper.js /core, I'm just using the same stuff on this side here to get that information, right? Bootstrap, but Bootstrap, the problem with Bootstrap is it uses Bootstrap beta. So I'm going to install Bootstrap and just replace it in a second with, Bootstrap beta 1, because this is what I want. I don't want the other Bootstrap, I want this one. So I'm going to leave Bootstrap out for now. Express I already have, I don't need to do that. jQuery I need, right? And let's put those in. So those are going to be inside of my module. And what happens is it will update my package. So if I kind of, because it's open, it doesn't show the new version, right? So let's just show the new version now, right? This is the new version. You can see that it included all my stuff. I don't have dev dependencies yet. We're going to do that in a second. But I also want to install Bootstrap. But what I want to do is I want to just take this part here. This is another way you can do it. Take the actual thing here, put it in the right order, right, as an example, which is just underneath here, right? And then do a yarn, save it, and then do a yarn install. Yarn install, and then it's going to install Bootstrap at the right level. This is kind of an important thing. Okay. Now what I want to do is get my dev dependencies, which are these ones and others. Let's do those ones next. What we know is we know that these are already in the right order. So I'm going to grab all these dependencies and kind of add them on to this part, right? There we go. Also, I don't really like my repository being way down there. I want my repository up here. So I'm going to grab this line right here. I guess I didn't do that. I did that already, but I forgot to save. So up here, I'm going to put it just below here. Sorry about that. We don't need this anymore. Well, we do need it for a second. Just make some more room. I'll put that up there, and I need to put an extra comma there. That's why that's happening. Sorry, guys. Again, don't need my private to be true. Turn that off. And I think we're good, except for engines. Didn't accept it. I forgot to kind of save. So this part I got to do one more time. Engines is going to be after MIT license. And I want to save that, but I want to change this to 15. All right, so we can save that. So that's all the same stuff we had before. Now what I want to do is I want to do a yarn install on these ones. So I do a yarn install, which installs all my typing for these ones. Okay. So that's what it did. Okay, next, what I want to do is I want to install additional typings, right? So I don't need this part anymore. I want to grab additional things for things like cookie parser, debug, Ejs, Express, and so on. I want to add those typings. I already have Express, there's Express, but I want to add other ones. Let's add those ones in too. So it's going to be yarn add at types / cookie dash parser, right? minus dev is what I want to put in, right? And then add the other ones at types / Ejs, at types / debug, at types / HTTP errors, right? At types / Morgan. So those are all the ones that are included here that are part of my Express generators framework. Let's just use that and press enter, and it's going to grab all those and add all those types into our dev dependencies as well. So this is what the bottom part of your package.json should look like at this point. Because I'm going to be using TypeScript for pretty much everything to start you off, as opposed to wait. All right, so a great start so far. And once we've got this, we're going to save everything. And we're going to go back, and I'm going to go to git add dot. Git commit -m, and I'll say updated packages. App packages. So that's what we did just now. And git push. Git push. All right, so that does everything. That's kind of up on GitHub. Let's put that as a final. So up online, let's make sure we save all this too. Up online, when we go to here, if I refresh, this is where our stuff is going to be right now, right here. All right, so we can see that this is our package, right? I'm going to grab this and put it into our in-class exercise as a new URL. And this is going to be the in-class exercise 9 final. Okay, so we can see that as something that you can follow if you want to compare your code with my code. Yeah, there's the final starter. All right, so that is the first part of our application. We're going to get to TypeScript in a second, but what I want to do at least now is run this thing and see what we get just by default. So again, and does it run? Like, does it even do what we're supposed to do? So again, control backtick. I'm going to go with nodemon. And if everything runs, you should get something like that looks like this, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run localhost 3000, and we should get something that looks like this, Express. Okay, for you guys now, are you with me? Can you see this thing where it says Express? If you can, check mark. If you can't, X. Okay, you should see what I see. I'm just waiting for the guys here. This is for the people here online. You can't install font awesome. How come? That's weird. It's preventing you? It shouldn't be preventing you, Jackie. I'm not sure why that is. No problem, Tom. All right, so no problem. No problem. All right, so that's the first part. What I want to do next is I want to put this up on Heroku, right? So that way it runs the way it is right now. And let's see what happens. Do I have a problem running this thing? So to put it up on Heroku right away, and this is part of your requirement for this week, I'm going to go to Heroku, log in. You should be able to have access to Heroku as well. I'm going to make a new app. You can call yours whatever you want, but I'm going to call mine WEBD6201 in the winter 2021. Oh, by the way, this all has to be lowercase. Winter 2021 semester, and it's Ejs 9B. That's what it's going to be called. I'm going to click Create App in the United States region, right? And then when I do that, I'm going to click on GitHub for my deployment method. And just like I've done before, I'm going to point to Durham Programmer, right? But I already know what my repository is, which is this one, right? This one right here. So I'm just going to grab the name for the repository, which is right here, and go back to Heroku and populate that here in the search, right? And then click search. And when you do that, you have this. I'm going to click connect. And that's going to connect my GitHub repo with my project, right? With my my Heroku project. It says, do I want to enable automatic deploys? I do. So I'm going to click enable automatic deploys. And then what I want to do is I want to deploy my branch to check it out. So then I can deploy my branch locally. And let's see what happens when, does it handle the new version of the engine, version 15? And it does. It looks at it and goes, okay, we're resolving node version. Let's install version 15.12. So it does latest version of thing as well. It means it probably can do npm 7, but I'm not going to do that right now. So it goes through, just like we did last week. You can go through the dependencies, and then once it builds, it's going to give us a little link at the bottom so we can deploy remotely. Yeah, because I put 15 in there. So I'm going to click create. There we go. And when we get there, if I have an application error, like I do now, what is causing the error? So that's the first part. So what is the thing that's causing my error? I didn't have an application error before. It looked like it were deployed properly. But if you have this, no need to panic. Remember, we can always redeploy, right? So we can look at activity. We can also look at more. If you look at more and you look at view logs, if you have a problem like this, it'll tell you what the problem is. So it says npm error right, it says failed at the WEBD6201 ICE 9 start script. So my start script failed, all right? So what is it looking for in my start script that's failing? Okay, so again, remember, this is like Heroku specific. So if I go back to my start script, what does it say in my package.json? It says in my package.json that I uploaded to thing, I have node and then server.js. So server.js. So this is where it looks. So why is my start script failing? Does it need an index.js? What does it need? And this is important. So let's try doing this locally and see what the problem is, right? Because again, remember, if it doesn't work remotely, it's probably because something's not working locally. So Control C. I kind of do npm start, then it seems to work for me. Node server.js. Sometimes though, Heroku is a little bit finicky in that I have both a main and a start, right? And this says server.js. Let's change these things to say index.js instead. So index.js, this will say index.js. Bear with me. Let's stop the server for a second, and let's rename our server.js to index.js. Just follow me for a second. So I'm going to rename this to index.js. Okay. Again, it really depends on the server. So sometimes we're a little finicky here when it comes to stuff, right? And then what I want to do is I want to clear, and I want to say git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say something like updated server to index.js, git push. Now, I don't think this is the problem. I know what the problem is, but it's probably because I didn't save my app.js. Also, by the way, I have my old package.json here, right? And I got to make sure that this package.json is not the one that I'm modifying, that I'm modifying this package.json. And notice this one is finished. So that is an issue, right? Let's try that again. Git add dot, git commit -m, and then updated package.json for Heroku. Sorry, that's my bad. I had too many files open. All right, so that did that. Let's take a look at my deployment now. So if I go back to deploy, and if I go to activity, it should show my latest build progress, right? So it can kind of show you this, and it'll show you the build progress, if it's building or not, right? So it says package.json, engines yarn is unspecified, and then it does npm, it resolves packages, it does compression, it says build succeeded, and if there's any problem, then we'll have a problem. We won't be able to see it, right? So let's try open up the application again, and let's see what happens. Sometimes it takes an extra time to propagate. If we have a problem, it'll show up, and we'll look and see what the issue is. But right now, we're good. So now I fixed my problem. I don't think that was the problem. I think I just didn't save my files. But anyways, doesn't matter whether it's server or index. In our case, we're just going to do index this time around. All right, so that's one thing. Let's also upgrade to TypeScript. Let's do that now. So I'll do Control-Shift-B, and I'll watch TypeScript files. But when we do that, we're going to have an error, right? Because our index.js, there is no TypeScript. Let's rejig this. So we'll rename this to index.ts. Okay, that's one thing we're going to do. And we're also going to change my app.js to index.ts, so or app.ts, so rename to app.ts. We're going to fix each individual one in a second. Let's go back to index.ts and see why it's complaining. Well, it doesn't know what app is that we're getting, so that's why it's going to indicate where we're having our problems, right? So app doesn't know what that is. It says app cannot redeclare block scope variable app, right? Because we're doing this again, let app. So let's go back up to here, right, into our app.ts and see what it's doing. Well, here's where app is being created. And it says the same thing, redeclaring this app variable. And this is where we have to do a little bit of some creative stuff. One thing that we want to do is instead of consts, we want to, for TypeScript, we want to use import statements. So anytime we have a const for a module we're requiring, that's a third-party module, let's change it from const to imports. So const to imports. You can see that this lights up. This first step inside of our app.ts. And let's keep going. So we did all this. We have lets for our route, and let app is computing now, no problem. When I come back down to app use with our error handler, it doesn't know what these things are. They're typed as any, but let's use that the error and the res is an HTTP request. So we're going to say it is an express.request object, and that res is an express.response object. That's what that is. Next, if you notice what next is over here, it's a next function. So if I do that, if I say next function, it's going to be an express next function. I'm just typing these things so we have a problem. And an error is going to be an HTTP error. So it's a HTTP error, right? Which is this one. And it's going to be create error HTTP error. That's going to fix the problem because we need to create suggest types to our function, anonymous function, when we're using it. Okay, that's what this does. And then what happens is we can get code hinting on anything that that makes sense. So locals will get that. Error, we may not get anything because those things don't compute, but status will get and render will get, right? Which is what we want. We want code hinting on all this stuff. So save. And then we're going to go back to our index.js and fix this one now. So now notice that my let app went away. Const require debug. If I change this to an import, I might have a problem because of this, because I'm trying to do two things at the same time. But const require HTTP, that one I can just definitely change to an import statement. Okay. So the HTTP module is what's happening here, right? Again, I'm going to get normalized port, and it's going to complain that val needs to be typed. So I'm going to change that function. As an example, is going to be a string. And by inference, it's going to return a string, a number, or false. So let's do that. So we're going to say it returns a string or a number, or it returns a Boolean, right? So string, number, or Boolean is what it returns. Parse int takes a string and determines a radix, right? These are ports, so ports, and a port is a number. You can see that that's what it is. So we get all the good code hinting. Error, again, is of type HTTP error. I can't get HTTP error because I don't have that requirement. So let's require that as well here, right? So going back to app.js, if I grab this, create error, I can import it multiple times, doesn't matter. And if I go back to my index.js and import that up here, create error, right? As well as in the previous module, it's okay. Then if I go down to error, and if I say that it's of type HTTP error, so HTTP error, then, sorry, I can use create error for that. Create error.http error. That'll fix my problem here. And now what this returns is void. All right, so I kind of got my return statement, and I fixed up my TypeScript. On listening also returns void. And we have basically everything using TypeScript, which is going to give us good support. Now, why are we using TypeScript with Node.js? We're doing it because it's going to help us later on down the line, right? Because we're going to get good code hinting throughout the entire process, and it's going to help us do troubleshooting. Let's do our index.js as well, because that is also needs to be converted. So we're going to take our index.js, right, and we're going to revamp it, so rename it. That's inside of our routes.js, routes, in our routes folder. Okay, routes folder, let's take our index.js and rename it to index.ts. And again, we want to import our express. We want to router, where it says var router is equal to express router. I'm going to use that as a let, where that's a configuration. That's not an import of a module, right? And then here, we're just going to revamp the way it looks like this. And we're going to save. And now we're good here too. We got all good code hinting, which is what's happening here. Okay. So far, so good. Let's put this up on GitHub. So we're going to say that git add dot git commit -m, and we're going to say converted project to TypeScript. Git push. So we can use TypeScript through the entire project now, not just in the back end or the front end. All right, so we're using TypeScript. I'm a TypeScript guy, so I like to use TypeScript throughout the entire time. I think it's a good practice. It's good code hinting, like we said before, and it promotes, you know, kind of a good experience for the user. That's you. All right, so that is what we have to do here. Now, what I want to start doing is starting to redo some of this folder structure. We have something called public, but remember we have public and we have garbage here, but we don't really care about, right? I have public and images and JavaScripts and style sheets, and I want to start using my own structure for this. We wanted to use Express Generator for what we just got. All those 3 pieces of code is really what we wanted. The rest we can do ourselves. And we're going to start by taking a look at our old code and incorporating some of our structure here. Okay. So first thing is I want to rename public to client. So I'm going to kind of rename that. We're going to call this client with a capital C. So that's our client. We're going to have to come back and monkey with the code in a second because there's some changes we have to make here in order for us to support the code changes that we're making. So I'm just going to close all these for now because they're going to start lighting up red because they're not going to know what client is, okay? There is no images in our stuff. Instead, what we want from our file structure perspective is we want an assets folder. And inside of our assets folder, we're going to put an images folder and maybe even other kinds of assets like fonts. So let's make another folder in there called fonts. And sometimes we might have special fonts. In order for us to maintain our file structure with 0 code in there, we want to make it so that we have a .gitkeep folder. Gitkeep file inside there. So let's add the gitkeep files in those places, right? So gitkeep. And now our assets folder will stay intact. JavaScripts will be renamed to scripts. And we're going to put our scripts inside there in a second. Style sheets, I did that twice, will be renamed to content. And we're going to replace our style.css with something else. So let's get rid of our style.css, delete, and we're going to replace it with our own stuff. Okay, so let's replace it now. So let's bring up our own stuff. This is our old stuff from last time. And in client, we have assets, content, data, and scripts. We don't have a data folder. We can actually drag and drop it into the client folder in here, just directly in here by going into our old folder, grabbing our data, and then dragging and dropping it into client, right? So there's data. It's a great thing about VS Code. It actually incorporates stuff from other places. Content, let's just grab our app.css and put it in content. I want to grab my scripts. All these scripts, I want to grab all these scripts here and drag and drop them into the scripts folder. Okay. So now I have now it didn't work. I put it in the wrong place. Just want to make sure I didn't put it in the wrong spot. So that would be catastrophic. And I'm hoping it didn't put it in here. That would be very bad. Types. Can't really tell. Let's try that again. So in my scripts folder, I want to grab all these and put them here. There we go. That worked this time. I also want in my views, let's rename views to capital V views. Actually, rename to views. And inside of views, I'm surprised I did that. I want to grab my my own views. So client, I want to grab my views folder, and I want to grab my components and content and put them in there. So grab components and content and drag and drop that inside of views. There we go. And I think I got everything, but we're going to also need the index.html, which I'm going to grab and put into views for now, right? Actually, I'll leave it here. I'll come back to that. All right, so we've rejigged a bunch of stuff. Routes should also be renamed. So we rename routes to routes. We also want a couple of folders that don't exist yet, right? Because we're going to support a MVC structure, model view controller. I want to also have controllers and models. Let's add those two folders in. So controllers, and I want to have models. Models and controllers won't show up unless I have a git keep file, so let's add those in for now. Git keep. Okay. That's our new structure that I want. But we need to change our app.js and our view and our other stuff to kind of deal with these changes, right? Otherwise, none of this will work. So let's go back into our app.js or app.ts. I mean, app.ts is looking at the wrong spots now. It looks at routes.index. It can't look at routes.index. It's going to look at routes with a capital R .index. Instead of views, lowercase, it has to be views, uppercase. That has to change. Public is no longer public. It's got to be client, right? And I also want another express static that I want to use. Remember we did this last time, which I want to use node modules, because I use node modules for, it's going to be on the path, so I don't have to kind of access node modules from my client folder. Okay, so those are important changes, right? That's what we've done. All I've done is updated the files that we have here. The rest is the same. We haven't really changed anything in here, right? So we've done all this, right? As an example, let's check index.ts to see if there's any changes in here. /app is the same. That's not an issue. And the rest, in terms of our structure, seems the exact same as well. All right, so nothing's different here. Fantastic. Let's see if that still works. So I'm going to go up on locally here. I want to go locally into my file, so localhost 3000, and refresh. And if it works, it'll come up here. Now the challenge is that when I do those changes, I have a task watch. Let's do a nodemon. And let's make sure that that works. So it looks like we're okay. And if I refresh now, you can see that this looks like different than it was before, right? Because my Express doesn't look like Express looked before. But I know that I'm using my own style sheets, whatever they are. It's also looking at style sheets style.css, right, for something. And why it's a 404 is because of my view engine. So my view engine in views, in my index.ejs, this is my template. Wow, what an ugly template. Let's update this. Notice also that I've imported inside my VS Code Ejs support down here. You can do that by going to your extensions, if you haven't done it already, and typing in Ejs, right? And you can see that there is Ejs language support that you want to include here. So that way, this one is the one you want, so that it supports Ejs files. However, the negative part about doing this is that, and I got to talk about the negative for a second, is when I look at my index.js, so if I look at this index.ejs file, it looks at it as an EJS file and not as an HTML file, which means I won't get any Emmet support, so that like quick support. So let's change this one right now anyway with my index.html file. So I want to drag and drop my index.html file in here, just temporarily. And I want to grab all of this want to copy it. And then I want to go back into this and underneath it, paste it so we can keep some of these things here. What do I want to keep? I want to keep this. I want to kind of cut this Ejs part out and put that in my head, my title for now. And I also want to kill some of our JavaScript that I was using before. So I don't want to use routing on the front end anymore. I want to do routing on the back end. So let's get rid of this. And I also want to get rid of my own files for now, my own JavaScript. We'll come back and put them back in. But for now, I'm just going to get rid of them. So I'm not going to use those right now. Okay. Now I don't need, and just so we can see the file, not because I'm injecting right now, I want to grab just these two lines here that we have and put them inside of our container area. All right. The rest we can get rid of. So now we have our template that looks like this, which is kind of updated to what we had before, right? And uses our updated CSS files. So now when I go back and I go to this, and if I refresh, you can see now that it looks like Express and it's using Bootstrap. You can see that immediately it is using Bootstrap because it's doing this. Cool. Let's put this up on GitHub again, because this is another spot where we've rejigged or restructured our entire system so that it includes all of our files from before, right? It's not everything's not engaged yet, which we'll do tomorrow. All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to go to git add dot git commit -m, and we'll add in, we'll say added previous project files. Git push. Okay, and we'll check this out and see if it builds. We push it to GitHub. Let's go on to Heroku and watch the build changes in our log. So again, I'm going to go to activity, and we have to wait a second sometimes when it's deployed, right? It'll start showing our activity changes right now. There it is. See how it's going. We can look at our build progress, and we can see how it's going through everything and installing everything. Okay, and once it's done, it's deployed, it's loading the output, build is finished. We can open our app, which means I can go to this site here and just refresh. And if everything went well, it's going to be fine. If it didn't go well, then it's going to give us this error, and then we can follow up and see what the problem is, right? So let's see what the problem is. So we have a problem. Let's go and look at our log and see what caused the problem. All right, so it says failed to at the web start script again, probably due to not a problem with NPM. There's likely additional logging output above. All right, so something to do with our start script again. Failed at start script. What? We know this is going to work, right? I mean, we didn't modify our start script in any way. What is the problem? So again, if I look at my package.json, let's make sure everything is saved. Start says node index.js. Here's index.js. I don't know why Heroku is throwing these errors. Yesterday it didn't do any of these things. And it could be just it doesn't like what I've been doing. Like doesn't like the TypeScript. It could be a lot of things. But we know a couple of things. We know that we are getting an index.js up there. Let's see what actually is on our code. Sometimes also it takes time to restart, right, the process. You can't restart it here. But if I go back to my application error and refresh, sometimes, not always, but sometimes we get this, it's just restarted. But I have a feeling it has something to do with our site. Let's take a look at our Ejs9b and see what we get. So we've got yarn lock, a tsconfig.json, a package.json, an index.ts, and a index.js. I wonder if I move back to the other system that it would work. And I mean that. I mean, like, changing this from index to server. So sometimes it's a lot safer, to be honest with you. But let's just remove this and go to and revamp, rename to server.ts. It should change it. I'm going to go back to my package.json. And let's make sure that the package.json is good. All my files saved. It's really weird. Like I said, normally I don't have an issue. So it should work. One thing is when we switch, this will fail now. That still works. No, it's server.js. It implements that anyway, so we know it works. See how that looks on Heroku now. And I'm going to go to activity and see if it's picked up the activity change. Again, I'm not sure why the node start script would fail. That doesn't normally happen. But you know what? Things do, Heroku does funny things. And again, the great thing is you can watch the build process so you can see if things are okay, right? And it rebuilds everything from scratch, almost like recreates the entire container, which is neat, right? Yarn cache. Okay, compressing, launching. I'm just going to switch to this and go back to Heroku. And let's make sure we can get to that file. And let's open app and see what we get. Why? Are you guys getting the application error, or is it just me? You shouldn't. I shouldn't get this, neither should you. It's really weird. Let's take a look at why. Activity. There's always a reason. It's not like it's happening for no reason. But why is it happening? So start script is a problem. The logging output above. Exit status 1. I wonder if I'm confusing it with my package.json file, which is my main. We'll get back to this. I'm just going to keep going, and I'll have to look at this after. But that shouldn't be an issue, guys. There shouldn't be any reason why this doesn't work, right? To be honest. All right. Because by the way, I did this all yesterday and it worked great. All right. So fantastic. I've got it working. Let's assume that everything is great and it's working. It's transpiled from TypeScript to JavaScript. What I want to do now is I want to think about incorporating some of our views, and inside of our views folder, right here's our views folder. In our we have content views, but they're all HTML, and there's components, and they're all HTML. Let's convert these to Ejs. So I'm just going to go here and rename. Please do this on your own. Rename all these to Ejs. Rename. And the reason why is because they're no longer HTML anyway. We're going to be using Ejs for everything, right? So we need to rename all of our views, which are partials, into something that we can use with the Ejs templating engine. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please, hopefully you fast forwarded when I'm all done. All right, there we go. So those are all done. Now that we have all those done, I want to inject my header and my footer, right? Because that's kind of something I want to do at the beginning. And I also want to deal with these errors. And then we'll stop for the day. Because this is where I want to start, right? Just like to convert what our project is from previous project to this project. All right, so let's look at that now. And how does this look, right? I want to inject it here. And we can use Ejs as an example. So if I go back up to Ejs, it gives us this. And if you scroll down, right, in Ejs, it also does layouts. And the one thing I want to do about layouts is it kind of has everything we need. So under layouts on Ejs website, I can go here and grab this include. And I want to put this include inside of my header. So in my header, I want to put an include, and it can't be header because it's inside of components header. I got to put that in there. So I'm going to say ./components/header. Okay. And again, just like this, I want to take this part and put that in my footer. And I want to say ./components/footer. And now, if we did everything correctly, if I save my files, my index.ejs is going to be, this is why I've made all those changes. It's going to be now a template that has my header from my previous header and my previous footer that are just being displayed in there. All right, so I'll save that and I go back to code. And let's take a look locally at what it looks like when I do refresh. And then look, you can see that I have my previous header and my previous footer right here. Notice that none of these links are working because remember we didn't make these links. We're going to revise this tomorrow and make everything work. Okay. Cool. We got all that working. Fantastic. Right. And I'm just wondering if it's being confused by my using TypeScript here. Maybe server can't be TypeScript. Don't know. We'll have to. I'm going to play with that, right? Because again, never seen that before, like as a thing, right? So it starts at server, and it goes here. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just it is being confused. I don't know, but that's okay because we can just convert this back to JavaScript by just eliminating the server.js and just leaving this file here by itself, or renaming this to server old or something, right? But again, I just want to kind of check it out. One thing that to note is when I go here and if I put in a link, like for example, if I do something like home, it's going to give us this not found, and this not found gives us way too much information about like what's going on. Like not found, that's the note, that's the error, and 404 is the code, right? I want to use a custom 404 for this, right? And what it does right now is it looks at our error.ejs file. Okay, that's what it looks at. So where is that being called, the error.ejs? Because that's where it goes through to look at this. This is our kind of our custom 404. So in our app.ts, let's look there first. So look, it says here, we want to create the error, and then we want to res render our error page, right? And we can certainly do that. That's the error page is our the template that we're using for our custom error, which is right here. Okay, but instead of this poor error page that comes up, let's replace it with something that looks like this. That's more stylish. So again, I'll grab all this work, cut it out, and go into our error page and go to the bottom, paste it in. And we're just going to paste some of these things in here. So one thing is I want to grab this message and the status code, but not the error stack. So I don't need to care about this anymore. The error stack is something I want to hide anyway, right? The message is definitely something that I want to put into, that I want to include here. So in my H1, I want the message, all right? And I also want the error status. So the message and the error status are the two things I want. So let's grab error status. and I'll put it next to it. Let's see what that looks like with a bit of a dash, right? I kind of inject it there. Let's get rid of the welcome. We're still going to have our header and footer, right? And we don't need this part anymore. And let's put instead of our title, let's put our message and the error right here. Okay, so error here. And let's actually say error. Oops. Hate when you do that. And same thing with here, error. So that we know it's an error page. So if I do that now, refresh, right? And refresh the page, then I'll get this. But it says not found 404, which is up here. That's what it says here up here. Let's revamp this so it says 404 not found instead, because I think that's kind of the standard way, right? That's our message, error status, and then our error message, right? Error status followed by our error message. Okay. So that is what it's going to show. If I save that and I go back up to here, we'll see error 404 not found, right? But we still see this and this. So that way, if we have a 404 error, we're not going to see that status stuff, but we will see this. We can also customize this later to say, oops, you know, you're looking for a page that's not found. We can do that later on, depending on the type of error we get. So if I get a message that says, if the status code is 404, we can do something different than if it's a status code 500. So we can create some conditional statements in here later on. In our app.ts, let's go back to this. Notice that I'm passing in, we're rendering the error page, right? And the message, we also have a couple of things when it comes to res. Look at where I have locals. So locals is another way of me passing in information. I can pass information by building up what this looks like. So I can pass in the error, right? That's what the message is. Error.message is the code, 404 or whatever. And that's what I'm passing into my page. But what I could also do is, instead of building it into local, I can bind it into an object. And this is the last thing we'll do today. So if I look at my routes, what this looks like is something that looks like this. So far we have a slash route. What about if I wanted to have another route, which is the home page, but this is with the default route, right? Default route. And then my home page, but this is with the home route. So if someone typed in /home, it's still going to look at the index template, this one, and it's going to pass in an object of type of title express. Let's change the title to home. Okay, so title home. But this idea of title, right, this title idea is something I can also use for the in my app.ts for my error. Because look, my res render and res render is the same. So let's do that. So we'll say I pass in an object instead of title, you know, as an example. I can pass in the title of, or I can pass in my message. So instead of locals like this, I can be a little bit more creative. I can say that let message be equal to error.message, right? So actual variables, and that's the error.message. Remember what that is. If we go back to my error, right, as an example, error.message is the type of message. What is it? You know, is it a found, not found, or whatever, right? That's error.message. So that is the message. And then the error this error here, so there's two, error and there's message, right? So if I said, and then if I said error, well, that's going to be the this part. So depending on the environment, I'm going to get the error object, this part. Now I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to store it in locals. I can store it in message and error. And then what I can do is I can pass in message in here, which is going to be message, this message. It's going to be called message in my payload. My payload is going to have an object that's going to go back to the page, and then I can also include other properties like error, which is going to be error. Now, why is it the same message, error, error? Because error and message are the properties of the object. Message and error are these things. So I'm passing in these objects in here. Okay. So if I did this and I go back to my error, I can't use what I have before, error, status, and message, right? Because that's what that is. If I go back to, I need the error that I'm passing in. So let's see if I just said the error, not the status, but the whole error. And I also want the message, error and message. So not error status, but message and error. Let's see what that does for us. Error and message. Is error too big? Right? Does it still work? It says not found error is the actual kind of error. Not found, right? So that's what it is, right? That's why we use error.status, right? And if I refresh, we're still going to have the same thing, error 404 not found. But we're passing in, inside of our app.ts, we're passing in the exact thing we want. That's what this is happening. This is actually the payload that we're passing in. So this is a demonstration of how we can pass any object we want into the page and any kind of content we want. Okay. By the way, if you look at error, error is an object, right? And it has many, many options here for the error. The HTTP error object has a bunch of things that we get. That's what error is, error.http error. So if I look at error dot, we have status, stack, name, status code, right, as well. So not just status, but status code. So let's see what status code looks like as well. So if I go back to the page, and if I put, instead of status, I put status code, sorry, I want to make sure it's spelled correctly. I forgot how that is. 1 second. Short memory and all that. Error.status code with capital C, of course. Error.status code. Status code. Let's see what the difference is with this. Passing in the object. And if I save it and go back to here and refresh, no difference, 404. So status code is what we're getting, not status. And status code might work better on the server too. All right, so error.status code is what I'm putting out. And I'm separating it by a dash and the message. The message is not found or whatever. And we can always switch on status code. So if I have a status code of 404, I can make my own message that says found not found, right? If I have a status code of something else, then we can have another thing here that goes through. And we can also do it on the server side instead of in the view side. Okay. So this is great. And let's just go with what I was thinking. I'm going to just save everything. So I'm going to save this. Here's my index.ts. So I'm saving this part. So I can actually do a slash and a home. But I can't do an about now. So if I go back to here and if I go to home, home works and it says welcome to home. But if I go to about still, we don't know what about is. And so we get an error 404 and we have to add some additional roots later for that. And tomorrow we're going to go through and add those extra roots so that they work. Okay. But for now, let's see if we can fix our problem on Heroku because we have a bit of an issue with our server.js not working. And I'm guessing that it doesn't like some of these things, like the property exports and so on, because it's trying to do stuff on Node, and maybe it just doesn't like this stuff. This might be okay, right? But it may not like my server being converted, right? May not like it at all, right? So again, I'm just mentioning it that might be the issue, and we can look it up. We can see what the problem is online. Let's say Heroku and server TypeScript. So a TypeScript server. So deploying TypeScript Node.js applications to Heroku, and they might have something to do, with a there might be something that's on there specific, right? That doesn't like you may not like something to do with TypeScript on the server side. It may not. I'm not sure why it would do such a thing. But like I said yesterday, let's see what I have with yesterday's server. So I'm going to go back to yesterday's server. So if I go to here and if I go to yesterday, I wonder if that's working, or maybe I just never checked it. Maybe it just doesn't like. Yeah, see, look. Tell me what the difference is, guys, between yesterday and today. There's no difference. I didn't do a darn thing differently. So let's take a look and see, just curious before we leave for today. What did I do differently yesterday in my files than I did today? So here's my server.ts. I use server, not index, right? And I created error and I did everything there like normal. There's really no difference whatsoever. Normalizing ports, I mean, I have no idea what was done differently. It might be just a typo somewhere. But yeah, I mean, it totally works okay. Server.js still has all this extra stuff, so it doesn't mean that that's the issue. And let me just look at my package.json here to see if there's any kind of weird thing that I've got in there. Server, I go node server 15. I got my engines in there and all the dev dependencies. This is all from yesterday. So it doesn't look any different than today. I'm just not sure. But I still have this, but I'm not sure. I mean, I thought that was a block, but I guess not. It's bizarre. And it shouldn't, like I said, I'm stymied. I really don't understand why that would be an issue, because it shouldn't be an issue at all. And maybe you don't have a problem when you deploy. All right, I don't know. All right, we've tried it locally. Let's deploy remotely. I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say we basically converted everything to Ejs, converted HTML to Ejs, git push. Again, I don't know what the cause of the problem would be, but it doesn't mean that we can't fix it or whatever. I just have to go through it, and there might be I got to do a diff between the two files, so there might be some small error. Either way, by tomorrow we'll fix it and we'll have it up and running. All right, so, and to check that, we can always go back to our current code, which is this one. And let's look at activity. We can see the build process. Looks like it's building, right? So the build process looks like it's okay when we build. It just doesn't like, for whatever reason, deploying our server properly. We get an application error. I'm just going to hide all this and click on Open App. I don't think it's going to change anything. Yeah. And it only gives us, the only thing, this is a problem for me when I look at the logs. I mean, all it's giving us is there's something wrong with my start script. There's something wrong with my start script, right? What is wrong with the start script? Node server.js. I'm just gonna, that's the hint that I'm getting, right? So to kind of figure this out, I'm gonna go back to yesterday and I'm just gonna compare side by side. So server scripts. Scripts, we put it under engines. Yes, we have main in there. We do. Yeah. And did we do anything different with our actual server than we did before? And what does our server.js look like? /app debug const import let const import. Okay. And what does that look like here? Sorry, one more sec, guys, and then we'll end for the day. Import const let. That's the only difference. I mean, that is crazy that that was the case, but you know, I mean, that's the only difference that I have. Let port normalize app set. It's almost like I'm feeling like I want to copy this whole file and port it into my full. Actually, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just grab everything. So a way of doing that is getting raw, getting this whole thing, and kind of copying my old version from my 9a. I don't know why it would do that, but just replacing my TS with my copy, paste. So this is all this. So that's going to change everything back to that. And we'll do the same thing with app.ts. So app.ts is just to make sure, because app.ts also should point to the same thing. So we're just going to, just to make sure, because those are the two things that are maybe different. I maybe did one small change, but I don't suppose that that is the problem. Here's app.ts. Okay, and app.ts here. Again, I don't think that's the problem. Let me undo that change for a second. I'll put that down here. And I'm going to grab this part. So I like that part better that we did today compared to what we did yesterday. Otherwise, the same. Module.exports app. Module.exports app. All right, so let's see that. And that should change those. And let's try it again. So we'll say git add dot git commit -m. We'll say attempting to fix Heroku bug. And if it's not the problem, we'll know, right? If it's not those two files, those are the exact same files now, the exact same structure. It could be something else, but you know, and then the next part would be me changing my package.json around. But those are the only two things that I could think of that would be a change compared to what we're doing here. So let's go back to activity, which we should see incoming now with our build process. So again, we're seeing it automatically, and this is a beautiful thing for me because it says, you know, it builds good, and we should be running. Let's get rid of this here. And by the way, the other thing we can do is it might be working. Here's another thing, but I might be caching, right? It could be caching as well. That's another thing that could be happening. And that way I can try it out on a different page. So let's try this just to make sure. Let's try this out on Firefox or something else. I mean, I don't see how that would work like that, but I want to see the error. Yeah, that's what I want to see. I want to see the error come up. So yeah, something else. It's something. It's not my files. That's for sure. Index.js and app.js are identical now. So the other option would be my package.json. So something in my package.json it doesn't like. So if I go to my package.json here, could be something that's in here that doesn't like. So the only thing I want to change is 9 from 9a to 9b. That's the only thing that's different. The rest is identical. All of these files and packages are the same, but let's see if that's the issue. And this is the last thing I promise is the last thing I'll change now, because I mean I've changed everything else. The code is identical from yesterday, and sometimes it does this kind of stuff, but I normally don't have this issue. So Control A, copy, go back, Control A, paste, and we'll change this to 9. Okay, it says 9. That's fine. I can accept that. This will be 9b. This is the other package. Everything's the exact same. I haven't modified anything. And let's just do a yarn install just to make sure that we're good to go. Yeah, it's the same. Everything is good. So it's the exact same. And let's do git add dot git commit minus m. I'll say updated package dot JSON to deal with Heroku bug. Again, not sure why that would be causing a problem. Shouldn't. It's the exact same that we've had before. So again, I'm not. And again, sometimes it could be something. Maybe I have to redo my application. Because it worked and then it stopped working, right? So why did it stop working, right? Who knows? Okay, let's follow up and go to activity. We can look at our activity log. It's already probably finished building most of it. And it's compressing and building. And I want to open up my app, and we're probably getting an application error. We should be launched already. See? And again, my logs are giving me the same thing. Something to do with the start script, it says. Probably not a problem with npm. All right. What about if I change it to a version earlier of npm? I know I said I wasn't going to do it, but one more time. Again, I'd have to do a diff. I think it's exactly the same myself, and it could be also what the what it emitted, but that would be really weird. That it would emit something different. So now I'm changing it to 14. Let's see if that's the issue. Again, I don't think so. No, guaranteed. If it's taking this long, it's got an error. So again, not long. I'm not sure what it is. It's not npm. It's not the node. It's not the version of Node that I'm using. That's not the problem. It's something else. So again, guys, are you getting this issue? That's the question I would have. I would ask you. Are you getting the same issue I have? I'm getting, because you shouldn't. Because right now, everything should be nicely linked together. Because it works for me, doesn't work for you, right? So I mean, again, and it could be the yarn lock, maybe because I'm using yarn lock here, and this is wrong somehow, the lock file, right? Again, I can delete the lock file, but that's the only thing I could possibly see as the issue. You guys, yours finally works. But why does yours work, Tom, and mine doesn't? Why? That's what I want to say, right? So why does yours work? I know we're over time, guys, but again, I'm just trying to deal with this problem, right? So it's not because of anything else. It's, I want to make sure. I'm a diehard. I keep trying stuff until I fix it, right? So, all right, that's new. Look at all this. So I did all this again. Bit bigger. That is different. It tried to do it, right? Tried to do it, but I'm just not sure. Runtime logs, and we can look at some of those as well and see what the issue is. So again, I got to look at what the issue is, right? So I'm gonna go through. There's something else that's causing a problem, and I don't know what that is. By the way, you can also go log your issue and go up online. It's not the normalizing port thing. It's not even the yarn lock file, because we saw that that worked. It might just something else is causing it to have an issue that doesn't like something that I put in here, maybe something that I installed, maybe a drag and drop that I did incorrectly. Like it could be literally anything, right? That I didn't install properly. So one thing to also do, this is something else that I like to do, is kill my node modules, because sometimes that could be an issue, right? So if you kill your node modules, right, as an example, and then after you kill all your node modules, you reinstall everything again. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, or again, look at, I just froze my. Sure, delete it. Not always, but yeah, it should give me errors now because it doesn't know what those are. That's good. Not always, but sometimes it's best that I delete all my node modules and then get them back again, because there might be something I did. But that would regenerate normally, right? So when I go nodemon, here, then it would give me an issue here. You know what I'm saying? So if I restart the server, it would show up as a problem locally. Like locally, I'm golden, right? It looks great, works great, but remotely not working. So not sure what that is. Anyways, we'll fix the issue. Wait, what? Content app.css. Oh. But that can't be it. I mean, that will stop you from working, right? /contents. Why? /contents. Content app.css. That is weird. That should be found. Something it doesn't like. Why? All right, guys, I'm going to end it here. I'm going to troubleshoot my stuff later. Thank you so much for everything. We'll talk more tomorrow. I'll have a fix for you tomorrow. Not a big problem. This is just me being me. And I just typed the wrong thing somewhere, and it's generating some kind of problem that I'm not seeing. And it's a bit of a needle in a haystack, as you can see, but I can troubleshoot locally. That is, I guess, a lead, but that I'm not sure if that was from yesterday, because my server and my app are identical to yesterday's now, right? So I'm not sure where that issue is. I'll find out what that problem is. In my app.js, one thing is a lead as well. In my app.js, I'm merging my public, which is this. Oh, there's the issue. Look at that. They should say client. Ha 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 ha. Okay. All right, that's it. Oh, wow. Wow. Guys, that is not right. Right? That is terrible. Right? No errors anymore. All right, that's it, guys. Wow. Updated app.js, app.ts2, correct. Heroku bug. Man, that's crazy. If that's it. All right. .63, so it'll actually do 7 point something. Come on, little error that could. Let's just do these things. No, that's really fast too. So that's how it should work. Fast, fast. So what is the error now? This is good. This is a different error. It says Donald crash / host path get / that's where it crashed on my router somehow. Client routes index, right? Routes index. What is going on today? Where's my index? Index going to home, index as EJS, index here, and that should totally work. Components header. That's a wild error that I just got. What does that mean? Complete log can be found at this. Roast exit with the 1. This is good enough usually. A request that I have an ID of something or another. All right, what about if I go to home? Will that work? It's crashed anyway, so of course it won't work. But what if, is there a way of, let's go back to my deployment. So what if I try and deploy the branch manually again? You can also do that. You can build it a couple times. Yarn add install dependencies, compressing. It tried. Now, what was the error? What happened? Says state changed from starting to crashed. App crash method get path slash host. Orange. App.ts. Anyway, I will figure it out. Guys, thank you so much for sticking on so long. I appreciate it. I know we went through some good troubleshooting, and we'll find out what the issue is tomorrow. Thank you so much for sticking on, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, take care.